Freedom Wars. Man, my all-time favorite PlayStation Vita game to this date. Started out announced in Japan and smoothly came over to the West a few months later. Launch was great, it was only $30, a whole $10 below the normal price of a Vita game. While this didn't make sense to me and to a lot of people, it was still mind-blowing due to the fact that it was literally one of the last AAA games, for Vita, and if anything, one of the last AAA games first party that came to the PlayStation Vita. Having just celebrated its third birthday, just a few weeks ago, I'm sure all of you have thought, where is Freedom Wars 2? Is there going to be a sequel? And things along that line. With such a revolutionary game that was developed with Western consumers in mind, yet it was a Japanese, studio, there's no way this will be the end, right? It just doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be possible. Now let me tell you something. If you're thinking that, you are precisely right. There is no intention of Freedom Wars stopping here. Before we get into details, at the end of the day, this is just a prediction, in a sense, formed from deep research, a little speculation, and a help from fans of mine. But rest assured, this is very concrete stuff that I'm going to be telling you, hence the length of this video. Before I can explain the reason behind Freedom Wars 2 definitely happening, the life in Freedom Wars needs to be understood in a sense. It's the first part of everything. Let's begin with the launch of Freedom Wars. This has a significance simply because of how it was an awful release, and not too many people knew about that. Despite that awful release, the game is one of the best-selling PlayStation Vita titles to date worldwide. So it seems that the game had a strict deadline to meet, and Junichi Yoshizawa was not able to properly add in the things that he had wanted to initially. So if you didn't know, on release in Japan, online co-op and PvP was not included. And the story feels pretty damn unfinished, honestly. The weapon upgrading and modding is very RNG filled and just sloppy overall. And the game was just overly broken until a patch was given to decrease the difficulty. The AI characters, the humanoid enemies, were very, very overpowered and just did really stupid stuff that was so hard. People complained. It's a big uproar. Overall, the game is just simply not finished. But a thing to note is the sheer passion that Junichi has for handhelds. In an interview, he was talking very big of his exclusive title before it was released, Freedom Wars, saying that the large number of 3DS sales is not something that he is afraid of or that we Vita owners should be afraid of. He says he believes the Vita could catch up. And it's funny because when he said this, it was 2 million total Vita systems sold, while 13 million 3DS sold. Honestly, Junichi, that is some passion, bro. That is some passion right there. So let's break some things down real quick. Freedom Wars is a cooperative action game developed by 3 studios. That's crazy. Shift, Dimps, and Sony Japan Studio. Shift also worked on God Eater, and Dimps is used to making competitive games. Now that right there is an indication of bad news. For starters, 3 studios making one game? That's very hectic. Think about this. Destiny is a huge AAA game, and it has just 2 studios working on it, And you have this little PlayStation Vita game with 3 studios. Imagine having the contact between all, each other. Just imagine that. Game designer Toshiyuki Yasui from Shift explained that he was excited about Freedom Wars and wanted it to be something that has never been seen before. And there was also Takashi Tsukamoto from Dimps, who felt Freedom Wars was going to be a big challenge because his studio is used to making competitive games, not so much cooperative. And in an internal conversation between the studios, it was concluded that making Freedom Wars will be tough, but the philosophy going in with Yasui and Yoshizawa as development progresses is, quote unquote, there's no choice but to do it. That doesn't sound very good to me, man. So upon release, the initial hype of the game was very inevitable. It had 188,000 units sold in its first week, and this is honestly from Sony heavily marketing the game in Japan. And Sony had actually went out and said they were expecting a total of 1 million sales, at some point or something like that. But you see, it wasn't long until the balancing issues caught up to the sales, hurting it pretty bad in the weeks coming, But still, Freedom Wars is top 5 most sold PlayStation Vita exclusive games. So, the whole initial hype couldn't stop that. It was such a heavily marketed game though by Sony. I mean heavy, dog. They had big big events in Japan specifically for this one PlayStation Vita game. You know, it was really panned out to be the PlayStation Vita's savior. And when that did happen and didn't happen at the same time, it kind of caused some confusion, okay? Sony saw the potential, but understood that it needed some work. By this time, it was, Sony's last published game on their own system. And, so the idea behind whenever they wanted to make Freedom Wars is they approached Junichi Yoshizawa and said, we need a killer PlayStation Vita app or game that will, change the sales. And that's what this game's mission was. So whenever Freedom Wars wasn't able to fulfill its duty of saving the system, some rumors ran around claiming that Junichi Yoshizawa was fired. But you see, this is not the case. So in an interview with Junichi Yoshizawa, he had clearly stated that he was personally leaving the Freedom Wars project, and that Toku Onuma, the assistant producer, will be taking over. Now, this doesn't make any sense. Why did the man, the most enthusiastic one about Freedom Wars, out of everyone working on it, choose to leave the project he had worked with and handled like his child for 3 years? Let that sink in. This man left the project on his own accord. There has to be a reason. And there is. Japan Studio has abandoned their handheld division that Junichi Yoshizawa was a part of since the PSP days. And so the thing is, staying with Sony Japan would mean Yoshizawa would begin working on home console games or PlayStation VR stuff, which he had no passion for. So he decided to leave, as he explained in his interview. He was the creator of Patapon, 2 Epic Escape games, and many other great titles that you may not know of. And so from those great titles, he was then asked to make this PlayStation Vita savior game, and he was sadly unsuccessful. In the interview, he announced his initial leaving. He also stated to, quote unquote, please look forward to hearing announcements from Onuma, I don't know how to say it, from now on. This kind of sounds like a hint if you ask me. So why is Freedom Wars 2 more than likely coming out? Let's get right into the clues. So we all know the whole Gravity Rush incident, right? Got a PlayStation 4 remaster, leaving the Vita completely, and now has a sequel coming out on PS4 in 2017. Since the 2016 delay isn't due to production issues, but simply just because games will overshadow it due to other delays, I'm going to use the 2016 date for Gravity Rush 2, for this whole video. So just understand that. So if Gravity Rush, which by the way sold 100,000 copies less than Freedom Wars despite having a 2-year head start, got the PlayStation 4, rebrand, switch, whatever you want to call it, why wouldn't Freedom Wars, okay? Why would Yoshizawa say to look forward to hearing announcements from Onuma? How can Sony spend so much time and effort promoting a game that sold amazing, despite the fact that it was rushed and had a game-breaking issues resulting in a terrible release, yet it still sold very well? Just forget about it, okay? Sony is smarter than that. They know they have something great in their hands. But with all this, now you may be wondering, well, if you're so sure, why have I not heard anything yet? Let me explain. So back to the whole Gravity Rush incident. Gravity Rush initially came out in 2012. And a sequel was teased at Tokyo Game Show 2013, which was around September, meaning if it was intended to release on the Vita alone, which it was initially intended to do, a mid to late 2014 release for Gravity Rush 2 would have most likely been the case. But as you know, this wasn't the case, and the game's focus changed to PlayStation 4. So now a big question is, when did development officially change from PlayStation Vita to PlayStation 4? Because once we figure that out, we can use this in our Freedom Wars situation, and through some analysis, we can make some educated guesses on this question of, when it was changed. And so this can give us an answer of why we haven't heard anything about Freedom Wars 2 yet. So at the time of the Gravity Rush 2 teaser trailer, which was in September 2013, Freedom Wars was in its later phases of production, since the game was reportedly in production for 3 years, and it was released on June 26, 2014 in Japan. And Yoshizawa's interview where he announced he was leaving was about March of 2015. So now think about that. This is just a few months after Freedom Wars US release that he announced he was going to be leaving the project. It would make sense for him to stay for a little bit up, of the US release to make sure there's no issues, and if there are issues, he can be there to fix it. Once it's all, cleared and panned out, Sony Japan can take over anything that's lingering, Now, in Yoshizawa's interview, it started out by him explaining his Freedom Wars tour, okay, where he would travel to the Panopticon locations and visited game stores and played with players and listened to their feedback and everything. This was like a straight up tour for Freedom Wars after he released it. And so to end off, his little blog post explaining how his tour went, that's where he announced his leaving of the project. Now note, this announcement is about 9 months after the Japan release. That's pretty far off. I can't help but imagine that this tour was his final goodbye to the PlayStation Vita. Or maybe just his project, he was so passionate about, his final goodbye. What I'm trying to say is, I'm sure Yoshizawa was already set to leave this project months before this interview happened, months before his tour. He announced his departure on his blog, and I'm sure he wanted the tour to end before announcing something like this. Imagine announcing you're leaving the project and then going on a tour, Let that sink in. Now, for estimating purposes, let's assume at the end of 2014, a few months after the US release of October 2014, is when he had planned on leaving. So let's say like November, December of 2014, he had planned on leaving the whole Freedom Wars project. By this time, the Sony Japan division was probably in the stages necessary to close down soon, like I had mentioned. So now if we go back to Gravity Rush, in terms of switching platforms, this is probably no simple task. Think about it. How do you move to a new platform on the sequel to a game? This is the first era where something like this has honestly actually occurred. It's really not the same as one game being on like PlayStation 1 and then the sequel coming to PlayStation 2. This is not the same thing, This is a current gen console exclusive, PlayStation Vita, switching to another current gen console. Gravity Rush was made to be an exclusive handheld title with its gameplay mechanics being molded for the PlayStation Vita. So the planning for the Switch had to honestly be thought out thoroughly. You know what I mean? A remaster had to be made. So before they could properly even talk about Gravity Rush 2, PS4 users had to be notified of this game so they can play it and properly be prepared for a sequel. The fact they released a teaser trailer for Gravity Rush 2 in September of 2013, and the fact that it was clearly, if you look at that trailer, it's clearly running on a PlayStation Vita. This narrows down our estimates on when the PlayStation Vita to PlayStation 4 production switch had actually happened. With all the clues we have, I'm estimating that by the end of 2013, production of Gravity Rush 2 shifted. It was fully shifting. They already started, changing the engine and whatnot. And Gravity Rush Remastered was already in production. So Gravity Rush Remastered was released at the beginning of 2016. Giving it about a 3 years time to optimize for PlayStation 4, and Gravity Rush 2 was set to release December of 2016, which gives it about 3, but honestly more like 4 years of production, since it was just about to be 2017. And also, since we're not 100% sure of when the PS4 Switch really did happen, we're just going to estimate of 4 years. And note, this Switch had to take what they already had made on a Vita engine and recreate the whole thing on a PS4 engine. And after some research, it's said that Team Gravity spent a solid 6 months just building a PS4 engine. And from there, obviously they start to begin the redevelopment process. So now you might be wondering why I'm getting so into detail on Gravity Rush. But like I said before, it's because this situation is so similar to the Freedom Wars situation. If we use the analytics from the Gravity Rush situation and plug them into Freedom Wars, we can get a good feel of when the Switch would be taking into full effect, to then estimate when we'll hear about it. Now, like I said, the Freedom Wars situation is similar, but of course there is some differences, and I'm going to explain that. Team Gravity began their Gravity Rush 2 development on Vita, okay? But then it switched midway due to the handheld department of Sony Japan being abandoned, and the overall just appeal for Vita was obviously not there. So this definitely had to play a role in the delay of the game even coming out. But you see, Freedom Wars, on the other hand, had a clean slate after their release. Gravity Rush 2 had already stopped production on Vita to switch to PS4, so it's like, obviously they're not going to make a sequel on the PlayStation Vita, so it's a clean slate after the release. I'm pretty sure that was the last first-party PlayStation Vita game, because most of the first-party games came from Sony Japan, so, yeah. But something to note is the idea that Junichi Yoshizawa is gone by this time, the man who molded Freedom Wars. This means many things, such as the whole game concept of Freedom Wars could possibly be changed, and or mechanics may change too. From the start, Alan Becker, who is the chief of Studio Japan, came from Sony Santa Monica. So what you might be confused about this, why I'm getting to this, is because Alan Becker was also part of, obviously, Freedom Wars, because he is the whole chief of Studios Japan, so he oversees everything being made. So he obviously has some type of influence on Freedom Wars. So the reason why I'm bringing this up about him coming from Sony Santa Monica is because this is two different types of game development environments. You see, Alan is, the person who's gonna make magnificent Japanese games, but he's sure to have some type of Western market feel to it, just so it can appeal to them. So imagine now that Junichi is gone, to prevent maybe too much westernization, now that he's gone, imagine what Alan Becker may do. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm just saying, mechanics for the game, the gameplay, even mission objectives may be altered now that, Junichi is not there. And the idea of this information is to indicate that while this time around a sequel wasn't started on the Vita, and they will have proper time to repair, this situation is more so a mission of rethinking and polishing what they have already. Meaning this could take some time, They gotta understand what Freedom Wars 1 did right, what maybe they need to fix, and how it can ultimately sell very well on PS4. Because again, this is a very good game that they know that it's going to be amazing. They have the passion for it. So now they really want to make it excel when it comes to PS4. Now to end it off, we can plug in the information from Gravity Rush and try to make sense of when to expect to hear of a sequel. So for Gravity Rush 2, it took 6 months for an engine, which now is unneeded for Freedom Wars 2 on PS4. There's also talk that the same engine being used in Gravity Rush 2 is going to be used for the Freedom Wars sequel. So there goes 6 months of work already done. The main thing that will be needed is the reworking of Freedom Wars. The storyboard, the gameplay, what they want to change and alter and keep, stuff like that. So from there, it was about 3 years for a PS4 remaster. So, anytime from now, because we're in 2016, 2014, it came out. PS4 remaster could be coming at any moment now. And so with estimates like this, we should be hearing of a remaster soon, and shortly after, we can expect a sequel. Just how it was for Gravity Rush Remastered, once you see that, you will know that Freedom Wars 2 is somewhere near, or some type of Freedom Wars game, basically. My estimates personally are Tokyo Game Show 2017 for a remaster announcement, and from there, it'll all just fall into place. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was very informative for you, and I hope you guys took it all. While I don't want you to take it all, by the heart or whatever, I want you guys to take it with a grain of salt. I still think that this I've done a lot of analyzation. I've done, a lot of some of my fans. H. Brent, he is very passionate about this. He is probably the biggest influence of me to make this video because of all his speculations and shit like that. That's honestly motivated me a lot to make this video. So I hope you guys did enjoy it. I hope it did, shine some light, honestly, so hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Be sure to leave a like and be sure to spread this video around. But other than that, I will see you all next time. Peace.
You see, I'm waiting and they hating, and I'm sipping on my tea. Bad bitch walking past, may I stop you, please? Man, I'm hungry as a bitch, but this life ain't free. If I'm trying to get this money, I can't really shake a tree. I be working, it's a 3:15. When I stop